Hey guys, when I first got into shooting, I was about 21 years old, and back then, military surplus guns were really affordable. So a lot of guys would try to use them as a carry gun. And that sounds a good idea. I mean, a military spec handgun should be an effective tool for self-defense. I mean, it's been tested under like extreme conditions, far more extreme than the average civilian will ever be likely to subject it to. But there are a few hiccups because of the age of some of these guns. Now, when I say surplus, I mean military surplus, not like police surplus. And in terms of that, police surplus is an excellent source for a lot of times barely even shot from very reputable manufacturers like Beretta, Glock, Sig. You can get awesome guns that are a little scuffed up, but otherwise mechanically sound. But for military surplus guns, there's a few issues. So I got a collection of 5 of my favorite military surplus guns. This represents a pretty wide spectrum of what you'd see out there. So I'll give you a rundown on all of them and why they are bad or good options for concealed carry. So one of the biggest things that makes a concealed carry gun good is the ability to use defensive ammunition. I mean, for the most part, ball ammunition doesn't really cut it. I mean, when you're shooting in a civilian occupied region, you have to know where every bullet's going, and you have to assume that your bullet will travel through your target and hit something secondary behind it. Not every gun can function correctly with hollow points, and it seems like, well, why not? That doesn't make any sense. It does in so much that their feed ramps aren't designed from inception to actually reliably feed anything but ball or rounded nose ammunition. So, and there's some companies, I think Winchester for a while made some ammunition that was actually rounded but still hollow point. I think Buffalo Bore might as well. But for the most part, military firearms are not designed, especially older ones, to reliably feed hollow points. That's part of the reason why guns like this, Wenad P83, do not make good carry guns. It was not designed to use defense ammunition. Now, another reason why the Wenad is not a great choice is because it's chambered in a fairly anemic caliber, 9x18 Makarov ammo. But let me show you what it looks like. And there's another problem I'm going to showcase here in a second. So it comes with 2 magazines and a leather holster, which is pretty cool. It has a nice oversized mag release. The iron sights are tiny. There is actually a loaded chamber indicator you can't really see. It's a tiny little nub on the end. And it does have a hammer drop safety. The gun is direct blowback, double single action. So I've got it on safe, put it back on fire, and the hammer stays down. So the first trigger pull is relatively heavy and long, almost like a revolver. You'll notice it's fairly accurate, right? I'm hitting a steel target at 45 yards. Because with direct blowback guns, the barrel doesn't shift. So you get a lot of good potential accuracy. Now the problem with 9x18 is that it's less powerful than 9mm. It's slightly more powerful than 380 though. So it's not terrible, but, swing and a miss. But it's still not going to perform up to modern standards, especially without defensive ammunition. Now there are multiple companies now that make defensive 9x18. Swing and a miss. That's better. But that combined with the fact that it has a fairly limited magazine capacity and the fact that this gun is heavy. It's actually pretty big too. This is substantially larger than, Kel-Tex or Smith & Wesson Shield. And it's also very, very heavy. So if you are gonna carry one of these guns, first off, test it extensively with defensive ammunition. And then secondarily, make sure you have a nice, sturdy leather belt or a heavy-duty nylon one. Your standard dress belt will not hold the weight of this gun. It will be very obvious you're carrying something. So, another aspect real quick that I don't like about this gun is right here under the trigger guard is a 90-degree angle. Whoever designed that is a jackass. That thing just tears up your middle finger when you go to shoot. Because this is a direct blowback gun, even though it's only chambered in 380, it has fairly snappy recoil, like a Walther PPK, right? What's a better solution? Well, if you absolutely must have 9x18, I think the Makarov is one of the better designs out there. Now, this is an IJ70. This is a commercial Makarov. It has the same type of safety, but the safety on this is actually the reverse. On this, up is safe and down is fire. So when you push the safety lever up, it drops the hammer with a hammer block and makes the gun function in double action once you put it back on fire. What's interesting is, and it's hard to see, The ejection port is fairly small in these guns because the 380 cartridge, or rather the 9x18 cartridge, its shell casing is very, very minuscule. Now, you'll notice this gun has the standard Bakal polymer grips, and I think personally, this is a much, much softer recoil. But unfortunately, it's still direct blowback, so it's not the most pleasant thing in the world. And even though there's adjustable sights on this thing, it's still not very accurate. Oops. I might have just, let's see. Yep. And that's another thing. These guns are not designed with modern shooting techniques in mind. So a lot of times these guns were designed for people to shoot one-handed. So if you have a high grip with two hands like this, you're going to impede the actual progress of the slide, or like in the case of the Beretta 92 as well, you're going to hit this safety on or off as the action reciprocates with your knuckle. So best case scenario, it accidentally scuffs your knuckle. Worst case, it puts it on safe when you need it to be on fire. Overall, in my opinion, direct blowback guns are a lazy solution to a pocket pistol. They truly are. They're reliable, but you pay for it. Another design, this is a Polish TT33 Tokarev chambered in 7.62 by 25. Now, this is a cool little gun, and initially I would tell people I would never carry this thing, but Buffalo Bore has come out with some defensive ammunition for it, which is awesome. I think with solid expanding ammunition, 7.62 by 25 could be an amazing self-defense round. It's kind of like the 357 SIG of 1942, right? So let's try this guy out. This thing is awesome. Very blasty though. 7-round capacity. This is a it's a swinging link locked breech short stroke action. So it is in fact not direct blowback. It has substantially less recoil despite having a vastly more powerful cartridge. Much louder. Now, one thing it suffers from is it is only single stack, so it only holds 7 or 8 rounds of ammunition. I think these are awesome, and they are still thin enough profile-wise that you can still conceal carry them inside the waistband. I think it's a nice little design. And actually, this design has a lot of really cool features that I wish were present in more modern firearms, like a fully modular trigger unit, which is, you can just pop the whole thing out and replace it. So it's really good for armorers, but it also would mean that if this were a self-defense handgun, like a commercial new production one, manufacturers could have drop-in trigger packs like on an AR-15. That would be freaking awesome. Very, very cool design. Heavily influenced by the 1903 pistol from Browning. And by heavily influenced, I mean blatantly stolen. But not every design from World War II carried over directly and makes a good home defense or self-defense tool. This is a Walther P1, which is a post-war version of the P38, the standard sidearm of the Wehrmacht during World War II. It replaced the Luger Parabellum and the C96 handgun. It is a single stack, 8-round capacity, 9mm, lock breeched, semi-automatic. It is very, very cool, but it has a few aspects of it that make it a poor choice for self-defense or concealed carry. But let's take it for a spin first. Now, first off, you'll notice compared to the other guns, the sights are nice and generous on this gun. They're large, they're easy to find, and the gun has very little recoil. It's very comfortable to shoot. Awesome. It's a little smoky with that ammunition. There's a few problems. Now, this is actually one of the guns that with the P1 version has no problems feeding defensive ammunition. Plus, the feed ramp is pretty generous. There's a little bit of space there, so if a shooter really wanted to, you could take a very fine Dremel head and kind of polish it into a better angle. If you're thinking that action looks a little bit like the M9, the Beretta, right? You're not wrong. It was definitely, the Beretta definitely took some influence from the P38. The problem with the P38, twofold. Single stack, only 8 rounds of 9mm. Second issue is it's quite heavy. Now, this is one of the models with an aluminum frame, so it's actually not that heavy, but it's really large. This is not a small handgun. You would need to carry this in a shoulder holster. most likely. You might be able to get away with putting it into an inside the waistband holster, but you'd have to dress around this gun for sure. Walther, if you're watching this, can we get a double stack threaded barrel version of this? Maybe takes Beretta 92 mags? But, I mean, you could do worse. It is a fairly reliable gun, and it is pretty accurate. Now, this design, I think you all know very, very well, or you should, the M1911. Now, this is interesting. This was a mil-spec one I had from Auto Ordnance. It is the second handgun I ever purchased. And when I say I purchased, actually my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, gave me the money to buy it when I was young as our anniversary gift, which was how I knew I had to marry her. And the mil-spec ones do not play well with defensive ammunition. There is a reason there was a growing industry devoted to customizing the 1911 and kind of streamlining it. A lot of these guns, if they're made to original mil-specs, will not feed anything but 230 grain ball. They just are not timed for it. The feed ramps are not the right angle, and they're a little bit rough. That said, as far as I'm concerned, trigger-wise, no gun on the planet has a better trigger design than the 1911. Anything with a single action only trigger is already awesome in my book, but the way this trigger slides directly back as opposed to hinging makes it amazingly comfortable. So I got some 230 grain ball I'm going to fire there. It's from Winchester Ammunition. Now this has the original mil-spec sights, which are really small. It's just kind of tough. And there you go. I've got some flat nose ammunition, and we've already got a failure to go into battery. So this is what I'm talking about. These designs were just not made. To feed that ammunition, because when these designs were developed, the ammunition didn't exist yet for the most part. Or at least wasn't common practice or wasn't commonplace. So all right, let's get this guy up and running again. There we go. Oh, and another malfunction. Can't even get it to go back in battery. It does not want to play well. That's our last round, so I'm going to put it back in its own magazine. I'm not going to bubble load it just in case. And it went fine that time. And that's the thing. If you're running this for home defense or self-defense, it's got to work when you need it to work. This gun doesn't play well with anything but original spec 230 grain ball. And if you notice, I said the first couple of rounds were flat nose and then you saw some ball rounds eject. That's right. The second half of the magazine were ball rounds, but they were 180 grain. They didn't have the same powder charge, and that also affected reliability. So overall, should you consider carrying a military surplus firearm for self-defense? If you can vet it personally, then go for it. If you're handy with a Dremel and you don't mind devaluing it a bit, sure. But I think now with the prices of MilSurp handguns just going through the roof, you're so much better off buying a new production handgun that's designed from inception to run self-defense or expanding ammunition. Thanks guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more burst reviews.